Let's start, though, with your former club, the Bombers. I'm sure there are elements of you, Lloydie, that are sick and tired of talking about them, but the members, the fans, they want answers, and in fairness to Essendon, they have provided some. We'll get to a lot of those, but first, an intriguing report from Mitch Cleary on 7 News about some of the internal rumblings, particularly from players. He expanded on that on SEN this morning.
Some senior players feel that there's a bit of confusion and some mixed messaging around their roles in the midfield and exactly what they need to do at the coalface. Some senior players just feel that the team structure and the rolling defence has been prioritised this year, but it is still causing some concern around how the method is dealt with at the coalface.
Cara, I might start with you on this. I guess from a journo's perspective, when you hear reports like that from Mitch, it's not usually this early in the year, and it usually does spell a little bit of trouble when players are beginning to talk to people about there being uncertainty.
Well, that's certainly very concerning, Sam. When you talk to some people inside at Essendon or the people they've spoken to, it's clearly not a happy place at the moment. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of people trying to work themselves out of the problems that are there, and very reminiscent to me of Richmond in 2016 and Melbourne in 2019. Very reminiscent indeed.
And even Carlton last year under David Teague to some degree.
Yep. Now, we're going to talk about potential reviews in a minute, but do your alarm bells ring when you hear players actually letting people know that there's a bit of confusion, dissatisfaction?
Yeah, it's hard enough winning games at the best of times, but you all have to be aligned. Everyone has to be aligned, and yes, you're going to have some rocky patches, but the moment players start questioning and doubting things, you're in a lot of trouble, and that's where the strong leadership needs to come from, the CEO all the way down to the coach, the captain, Ross, because once people start fraying and talking and doubting, and talking outside of club circles, and
but it's really simple.
You're in trouble, yeah.
Lee Matthews, and I love his simple logic. Harmony helps, friction fractures. Yeah. So once that friction starts to happen, what we're hearing, the fracturing starts to occur.
So what are you doing if you're Ben Rutten and you're listening to that? Is it, I don't care, it doesn't matter what the outside are thinking, or hang on, we need to address this?
I think you need to acknowledge that it's come from somewhere, but you can't be dictated. You've got to control your own narrative, but his best thing you can do is the morale of the group, the dynamic of the group, work on that and give them solutions. Football is a solutions focus, and their numbers that we might go through, their football is horrendous at the moment. I did specials on that game. They turned the ball over horrendous amount, centre-back. Bulldogs scored 50 points from centre-back turnovers, and they can't move the ball. Conversely, the Western Bulldogs walked it out of their front half, and in context, Essendon created 3 points from turnover against Western Bulldogs' ball movement. So either end of the ground, they're a mess.
Hey, Ross, can a coach admit that he's got things wrong to his players and say, yeah, I'll put my hand up, there hasn't been clear enough, but this is what we're going to do now?
And I've done it. Yeah. And funnily enough, I caught up with Revolt the other day in Montagna, and we spoke about it. And a couple of times I went in and I said, look, this is my fault. I got this wrong and I didn't prepare you properly. Yeah. And I also said, if I'm in here week after week saying it, well, it's time for me to go. So you need to be able to identify it, acknowledge it, and the players like that. But you need to fix the problem. If you've got the capabilities to do so, and they're better than what we're seeing, quickly, otherwise the fracture happens.
And Damien Hardwick did that at the end of 2016, put
100%.
his hand up. I want to go a bit wider though, Sam. So this is a football club that, my view is it takes years, maybe even more than a decade, to recover from the drug scandal. I've always been critical of their new home at Tullamarine. Beautiful facility. It still doesn't really feel like a footy club to me.
I agree with that.
And the turnover of people at the top, not the CEO, but underneath him. I mean, look at the footy managers that Essendon have had since Xavier Campbell came in. Obviously, they split the job between Rob Kerr and Neil Craig. Then Neil Craig left pretty quickly. Mark Neal came in. He took over as game performance, coached a bit of Craig's work. Daniel Richardson for 2 years, he famously fell out with the CEO and was removed at the end of 2019. And now we've got Josh Marnie. So it's pretty fascinating, really, that we're already hearing calls for a review from Mark Robinson in the Herald Sun very early in the season for a review call. I'm not sure whether we're quite ready for that yet, but it is interesting, isn't it, Matthew, that there have been 2 reviews under Xavier Campbell, but they haven't gone outside as Richmond did and a lot of other clubs have done. Carlton did last year. They've been internal reviews.
Yeah, and if it does get to that, Cara, I think there should be outsiders involved at Essendon just to get a fresh set of eyes. But the next month, Hawthorn a team around them. Swans at the SCG, Tigers Dreamtime and Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. So I think at the mid-season mark, that'll be the time to assess whether the club does need another review, which you'd hate to see the third one in the space of 6 years, Sam.
Ross, you said you did specials on the weekend. You would have done it for a few games. When you sit and watch Essendon, do you think there's lack of system or lack of talent, or is it a mix?
Well, I don't think they're high-end talent. They're not the most talented list in the league. But when you're winning the ball and getting as much as they are, they're better than a 1-6. And I think we all acknowledge that. So that's why we talk about possession without penetration. They're number 2 in the AFL for disposing of the ball, whether it be a kick or a handball. They're number 2. So they're getting their hands on it, but they're basically a 1-to-1 kick to handball. And they're 15th for metres gained. As I said on the weekend, they couldn't get it out of their D50 and they let the opposition walk out. So the other thing I'll say is the Western Bulldogs, Caleb Daniel, Bailey Dale and Richards were the best players on the ground. Essendon's system is to put a high forward up into the stoppage. It gave the Bulldogs a spare all day and they didn't change it. Now, Ben Rudd's the systems coach and he's living and dying by it, but I think he needs to look at the system because the Bulldogs love that and they couldn't get anywhere near them.
So, Sam, this is a team that beat the Hawks in round 14 last year. Then they smashed the Crows in round 17, then beat the Bulldogs in round 21. They beat the Suns by 68 points in round 22. They beat Collingwood in round 23 by 38 points. Then they go play a final. So it's amazing how quickly this has gone wrong. A lot of talent were playing all right last year. But here's Josh Marnie, the head of footy, speaking after the game on Sunday.
And we have to really look at our ball movement, how we get it away from our defensive 50 and also how we maximise our clearances. You saw we handballed far too much today. And that was a little bit of the credit to the pressure that the Bulldogs put on, but it's also us just handing the ball to a teammate and not taking on the responsibility ourselves. And that was spoken about at half-time. We had a little patch there where we started to fight the tackle a little bit more and take the ball forward, but again, fell back into that handball back. And it's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for the players, frustrating for you guys. We want to be kicking the ball more. We want to be seeing more of our ball movement come out in games at the moment. And it's just been a little bit more to handball happy at the moment.
So they know what they want, but I just want to show you that what went on against Collingwood on Anzac Day, only like 6 or 7 days before the Western Bulldogs game, and then it repeated. So this was on Anzac Day, so he said we want to handball more. So they had 6 days to address it. 6 days later against the Western Bulldogs, so this was the problem. They did exactly the same thing. They repeated all the mistakes. So they know what they want, but for Ross, it's just they can't get the players to do it. So how do you address that? Where they're saying do it.
This is what I'll guarantee you. This has been happening on the track, and they might deny it, but what you're seeing here would have occurred over pre-season and is occurring on the training track because how you train is how you play. So at some level, that's been allowed to happen during the week and pre-season.
Speaking of training and fitness, we spent a lot of time last year talking about Jake Stringer, who had some sort of breakout season again. He was out of contract. I think you were very strong not to give Jake a long-term contract. We talked about this a lot. Jake Stringer's now done a hamstring. He's out for another 4 weeks at least. Question marks over his fitness, certainly question marks over his form as well, Ross.
I did the game. I thought he looked speedy and quick and it was frustrating. I didn't know any forward to kick goals on the end of that ball movement. They had 35 inches, but he's had groin injuries. You can't get the running in. And he's a player that needs continuity. And if you don't get the continuity, you need to be strict on your nutrition.
His numbers are well down.
So it feels like, and it's easy, I wouldn't say it's comfortable, but you can just lose your way that 10%. And that's the difference between being a top-flight player and a mediocre player in the AFL.
He's eased off a little bit since the contract?
I'm not sure. We had the discussion. I think he's had some roadblocks with groins, but people are saying, I thought he looked quick and powerful on the weekend. Now, is his work rate the same? I haven't seen a big enough sample, but it was very difficult to play as a forward in that team.
We're going to talk about Mitch McGovern later from Carlton. Some players are forever chasing their tail. I've been critical of Jordan De Goey in the past. If you don't prepare well enough, you're forever chasing your tail. And Jake Stringer's been one of those across his whole career.
Yep.